I was at school thinking that awakened people were very weak in this era, and that was because the world was too peaceful. Some students who were just a little stronger used that to intimidate the others and steal their money. I didn't remember who this bully was, but his arrogance was so big that he didn't even respect the teachers. The bully got annoyed when I got in his way and shoved me. Later, the teacher said she had high expectations for me. When I went through the awakening room to find out which element I had, I got a huge surprise. It was all of them. And every time I level up an element, I get a new random class. That was ridiculous. The infinite awakening power. But my starting points were all at 0. I needed to choose my first class carefully. So when I left the room, the other students accused me of taking too long inside. Teacher Hang was excited. So I killed the mood and told her my class was Core Warrior, an awful class. I expected to be mocked by him and told that I should accept failure. But the teacher had a heart even bigger than her boobs. She said effort is more important. The bully from earlier showed up again and said in front of everyone that this speech was fake. He said the teacher should know better because she has mediocre talent, and that's why she is just a teacher. For the first time, I was furious, but the teacher accepted being insulted in front of everyone. The student explained that your class level will decide the rest of your life. And the weak with bad talents are just trash. When he said she could do well in life if she did favors for someone powerful like him, I gave up just watching and crushed the cup in the bully's hand. Maybe this soda will cool this idiot's head, I said out loud. Han Qiangsheng was a natural talent who didn't even need to use the awakening room. He attacked me without caring about my life. Not even a teacher could save me in time, but I kept my cool and blocked the attack using a blocking skill. The bully's face changed in seconds. The attack was completely reflected and his arm was destroyed. Changing was thrown meters backward. It was a crushing defeat. How is this possible? I didn't even understand what happened here, thought the small rain bully. Everyone was shocked by the scene. The weak boy he now looked like a completely different person. His power and confidence were visible. The teacher was the most shocked person there. She saw it happen and knew that the exclusive ability of the warrior class, material perception, is elite level. It blocks 100% of incoming damage and reflects it back to the enemy in 0.09 seconds. Not even elite warriors fully master that. The hidden truth that nobody knows is darker than anyone could imagine. The truth is that Bai had gone back 20 years into the past. Bai is not a child. He is a man who lived every second of the last 10 years leading the strongest awakened team in the world, the Divine Squad. His mission is to eradicate demonic layers in the name of the highest authority known as God. This is the Huntile layer the Divine Squad faces. Among the members of the Divine Squad is He Li, the Lightning Assassin. This mission classified as a rank L purification. The maximum difficulty level make her presence crucial for victory. The team also includes Han Zalen, the Cloud Mage. Despite the extreme difficulty, Bai, the leader, believes that after this mission, he can finally take a vacation. The group support is Lucian, the Star Maestro, whose ability allows him to amplify gravity up to 100 times, enhancing attacks. Bai himself, known as the Sacred Swordsman, uses his ability, the annihilation of 10 domains. It's no wonder he leads such a powerful team. Together, they complete another mission, eliminating the SSS-ranked Demon King, Belelfagor. Han Zalen comments that the mission ended too quickly and that he would have liked to have enjoyed it more. Lucian observes that being a top priority mission that required the entire team, didn't it seem dangerously easy? Bei replies that the information indicated the Demon King was special, possessing 5 elements and a secret ability. Hila approaches Bai and asks if they will really take a vacation. She expresses a desire to go on a date with him, but Bai replies that everyone will go together to their usual spot to celebrate. Hila laments that her technique didn't work again. Next, Bai mentions that one of his colleagues did not show up for the mission. Lucian explains that the absent member had said he would take care of the remains, but did not appear during the fight. Hilo complains that this always happens and that the captain should be stricter about absences. At that moment, someone stealthily appears at the location and activates a purification mission. The individual attacks the group, and Han Shaolin is the first to be hit. The entire team is in shock. Bai tries to react, but realizes he cannot move his body. The adversary reveals that throughout the previous month, Bai's coffee had been laced with paralyzing agents. Then he uses his ability, the Forbidden Tomb, stating that to eliminate the strongest member of the group, he needed to ensure everything was perfect. The adversary, who in the past pretended to be an ally of the team, now declares that it is God's will for them to be eliminated. Next, the other members of the Divine Squad are eliminated before Bai's eyes. Furious, the leader asks why his former ally is doing this and what kind of deity would order such an act. The adversary replies that his old captain remains naive and attacks Bai, saying that his god needs no reasons. Bai retorts that they had been together for over 10 years and that he considered him practically family. The adversary claims that Bai still hasn't understood anything. He reveals that on the day they met, God was already moving the pieces and that the entire team was nothing more than pawns. That's why he pretended to be everyone's friend just to gain their trust and catch them off guard. With that, the adversary confirms that all members of the group have been eliminated and his mission is complete. After being hit squarely, Bai wakes up in a strange place. There he encounters a mysterious being whom he recognizes as Belelphegor. However, Bai questions this as the Demon King should be dead. Belelphegor, the SSS-ranked Demon King, states that he would not die so easily. He explains that this is his spiritual space and that the entire realm of Nia is his true vital essence. Getting straight to the point, Belelphegor proposes a deal to Bai. He reveals that his special ability, Return of Life, allows him to send someone to the past, granting them the chance to correct mistakes. Then he asks, wouldn't Bai like to do that? Bai, the team leader, thinks of his companions and recalls the good times they spent together. He concludes that all of this was taken from him by a traitor and now he desires revenge. Thus, Bai declares that he will eliminate the traitor and all the gods he claims to serve. Belelphegor accepts Bai's answer, asking him to consider it a welcome gift. However, Bai, not being naive, asks what the price of this deal is. The Demon King merely smiles at the question. Next, Bai wakes up. He has returned to the year 21005 in the Holy Kingdom of He, a vassal state of Jiang. Bai realizes that he has indeed gone back in time, as he is in elementary school. Furthermore, at this time, he had not yet awakened his powers being just a child. The elementary school teacher reprimanded Bai, noting that he always sloppy, was now sleeping during her explanation. As punishment, she put him in detention. Bai was still in shock, stunned by the reality of having traveled back in time. He saw faces he hadn't seen in over 20 years, and the situation seemed completely surreal. Despite everything, the class continued, led by teacher Huang. She explained that in that world, there were 5 types of elemental powers: lightning, flower, cloud, core, and stellar. However, each individual could only manifest one of these elements in their body. The teacher demonstrated that her own power came from the rarest element, cloud. Depending on how the element fused with an individual's body, powers were divided into 3 categories: combat, utility, and special. When the 5 elements were combined, they became even more powerful, as exemplified by the school's strongest guild. The teacher stated that her students stood out among billions of people for being potential awakeners, and for that reason, they were flattered since childhood. However, she warned that the real challenge began that day, as there were about 100 other classes of students with the same potential as them. Classes were divided into 4 qualities: dust, firefly, abyss, and celestial light, and each of them would have only one chance to awaken their class. That afternoon, at the moment of definition, the result of this process would determine each person's place in the world. As soon as the class ended, she announced that it was her class's turn to go through the awakening process. She advised them to remain calm to avoid getting hurt. For his part, Bai reflected that there were 2 known ways to awaken. The first was natural awakening, as it happened with Hong Chang. Generally, it happened to people with excellent constitution and talent. At some point of extreme emotion, the awakening occurred on its own. The second was through the awakening space room, a product of the intelligence of countless scientists. Inside, a person's adrenaline and emotions were intensified to the maximum. This induced awakening among potential candidates. However, each person could only awaken once, and the result was always random. Therefore, changing classes was also seen as the only chance to change one's destiny. After some students went through the process, it was Bai Yi's turn. He had before him the opportunity to select any quality, element, or profession, including the rarest and most special ones. Bai recalled the gift the Demon King had granted him. Now he understood it was the power of infinite awakening. The system warned that after choosing the initial profession, all elemental bars would be reset, requiring a cautious decision. After making his choice, Bai finally left the room. So, he was humiliated by the bully and got angry when even the teacher with incredible proportions was humiliated too. He just defended himself against the senior student's attack. With just his defense, he dealt so much damage to the bully. To everyone's surprise, Bai revealed that he chose the core warrior profession because it already came with an initial sword of good attributes. To everyone's surprise, Bai revealed that he chose the core warrior profession because it already came with an initial sword of good attributes. After getting up, Hong Chongshan claimed that the boy had only been lucky, but guaranteed that it wouldn't happen again. Because unlike the brat, he possessed a truly powerful class, which placed him on a superior level. Observing all of this, Teacher Huang thought that what she had seen was not mere luck. After all, she had witnessed with her own eyes her student blocking the blow at the exact moment he was about to be hit. And then he retaliated the attack with precision, something that even she, as a teacher, wouldn't be able to do. Furthermore, there was the fact that her student had awakened just a few minutes ago. Someone with little combat experience shouldn't be capable of such a feat, so she wondered how Bai had managed it. Back in the fight, Hong Chang declared that the boy should bear the consequences of his actions and that he would teach him his place in the world. In turn, Bai thought that choosing the weakest class was a mistake for those who didn't possess the knowledge he had, which was why the others were shocked. But since he came from the future, he knew very well the attributes and qualities of all classes, including the one he had chosen. Some students questioned if the fight would actually happen, as using powers to duel at school was strictly forbidden. They believed that Hong Chang acted with such arrogance only because he was the son of an influential government figure and the school principal's nephew. On the other hand, Bai was seen as a nobody, and many imagined that he might even be expelled. The teacher, aware of the situation, tried to appease the spirits and calm the students. However, the bully had no intention of letting things go. He declared that even if Bai knelt and begged for forgiveness, he would not stop punishing him. Meanwhile, Bai pondered that the difference between the qualities of the classes lay in the attribute bonuses, which were entirely distinct. In Dust quality, the bonus was 100%, which meant that the values remained unchanged. The same profession in Firefly quality received 150%. In Abyss quality, the percentage was 200%. At the moment of awakening, Abyss-level professions already possessed double the attributes of Dust-level ones. This disparity in power, he knew, was an insurmountable chasm. Knowing this, the nerdy student thought that Bai was in trouble, as he was clearly inferior to the bully. He wondered why Bai had decided to confront someone so superior to his newly awakened abilities. The student reflected that the society they lived in was full of people who stepped on others whenever they could. Thus, the way to survive this was by swallowing one's pride. For him, only those who knew how to yield could resist. Confronting head-on was the most foolish choice, as it only led the individual to be even more humiliated. Back to the fight, the teacher imagined that there was no way Bai could emerge unscathed. Although he had managed to block the first attack, now the opponent was applying much more force. Counting on a guaranteed victory, Hong Chang stated that the boy would have no way to dodge. However, Bai claimed he had no intention of dodging. He used an ability called Ghost Step. In this way, the opponent passed through Bai without even touching him. Not only that, but Hong Changjin ended up injuring himself with his own knife. Even so, he blamed the protagonist, claiming that trash like Bai could not win. All the other students were confused. Even Bai's teacher couldn't explain what had just happened. The class representative, Chi-In, who was also nearby, noticed that Bai activated the warrior's impulse ability at the exact moment the opponent attacked. Soon after, he used the ghost ability to avoid being hit. Furthermore, with a single blow, he ended the fight and emerged unscathed. Chi-In concluded that Bai, in addition to completely mastering his class's abilities, also managed to apply them perfectly in real combat. Above all, he did everything without breaking the school rules, as it was the opponent himself who self-inflicted the injury. In turn, Bai realized that this fight earned him experience, and that the more enemies he defeated from then on, he would receive points to use. However, he noticed that to evolve as he wished, he would soon have to clear some dungeons. Still irritated, the bully declared that the fight was not yet over and tried to strike the protagonist from behind. However, someone arrived just in time to stop him. It was Hong Ling, the school principal, and Hong Chang's uncle. He said that his nephew had already been shamed enough. As principal, he stated that everyone had already gone through the awakening that day and therefore should go home and rest. At that, the principal told Bai that the school had strict rules and that he should know that. However, Bai's mind was elsewhere as he realized that returning so far in time meant that all his friends were still alive. Furthermore, on the day of his awakening in his past life, something grand had happened. Because of this, he was furious for having forgotten that event. After all, it had been the most important thing until then. Bai ran off and left the principal talking to himself. Hong Ling, in turn, told the teacher to control her students better. Teacher Huang apologized, and the principal claimed that this time he would let it slide, but that it was better for it not to happen again. Once in his office, he was alone with his nephew. Hong Chongshan claimed that that brat was lucky, otherwise he would never have lost. However, his uncle disagreed with that statement. He claimed that the instant Hong Chongshan approached the boy, the latter activated an advanced ability called Ghost Step. Furthermore, in a fraction of a second, the boy aimed at the most fragile point of Hong Chang's body and completely broke his defense. Despite all this having been done with only basic abilities, the principal stated that even with 15 years of war, he doubted he could imitate what the boy did. Watching the fight, it seemed as if his nephew was a novice being humiliated by a professional player. Therefore, he stated that that boy was nothing like what they imagined. Speaking of the protagonist, he ran through the city imagining that besides his revenge, there was something very important he needed to do. As soon as he arrived home, he remembered what had happened in his past life. Now, he wanted to prevent everything from happening again, even if it meant risking himself to the fullest. Upon arriving home, Bai found his family. His father was in the living room watching television while his mother prepared food in the kitchen. Bai's father noticed that his son had arrived early. However, Bai completely ignored him, focused only on his mother. He felt a deep emotion seeing her alive, as it had been a long time since the last time. As he approached his mother, she communicated through sign language that she had prepared Bai's favorite spicy noodles. However, the protagonist expressed a desire to eat fish. His mother said the meal was already ready and asked if he couldn't leave the fish for the next day. Bai insisted, claiming he was very hungry. Then his mother said she would go out to buy the fish. Bai tried to go with her, but his father intervened, saying she could go alone. He questioned what was wrong with Bai, who was returning home without even greeting his father. The father reminded him that that day was supposed to be the boy's awakening, and asked if he had any good news to share. Bai's father, who was also an awakened, mentioned that he had even bought beer to celebrate with his son. Bai, however, explained that he had not awakened, as there hadn't been enough time for all students to go through the process. Annoyed, his father asked why he had returned so early. He claimed that the son of the great Lei had awakened a Firefly class, and like his father, had become useless. But as his son, Bai should at the very least awaken an Abyss class, as it had been with him in his time. The father added that he worked hard to support the family, and the least the boy should do in return was awaken something good. Then he asked once again what Bai's profession was. The protagonist insisted that he had not awakened. This, however, angered his father even more, and he broke a beer bottle over the boy's head. With his powers, the father was able to see his son's awakening and realized that Bai had awakened a dust class, one of the lowest. Furious, the old man asked what the boy had been doing at school to awaken something so inferior. Bai thought that his father had always been violent, someone who didn't know how to control his emotions. In the past, when Bai awakened, his father also became furious because he had awakened such a low class, and feeling ashamed took out all his frustration on his son. Bai's mother tried to protect him as always, but ended up being the target of the aggression. She absorbed all her husband's fury. After the incident, she suffered severe consequences and was never the same again. Bai carried the guilt for a long time, as on that day, he couldn't do anything to help his mother. But now, he thought he had an opportunity to do things differently. Although he wasn't as weak as in his past life, Bai knew that his father was a much stronger awakened. Defeating him wouldn't be as easy as dealing with a school bully. Annoyed, the old man hit his son while uttering malicious words. While being beaten, Bai could only think of getting his mother out of there as quickly as possible. At least he managed to get her out of the house. However, immediately afterward, he saw something he didn't want. His mother had returned home, arriving right in the middle of the conflict, exactly as in his past life. Bai wondered why she had returned so early. Extremely angry, the father blamed his wife for their son's weak awakening and didn't seem willing to stop there. In his past life, the protagonist held a grudge for what had happened. At one point, he managed to avenge what happened to his mother, but ended up being arrested. However, he felt no remorse as he believed the old man had received what he deserved. Back in the present, Bai tries to protect his mother, acting differently than he did in his previous life. However, his father still proves to be much stronger than him. This is because awakened individuals, even without using their abilities, possess superior strength compared to ordinary people. A normal person would not be able to withstand a simple punch from an awakened individual. Although Bai manages to withstand the blows, his mother in turn tries to protect him at all costs. However, the old man shows no intention of stopping. He claims he was extremely happy to learn he would have a son, as he believed the son would finally bring honor to the Bee family. Now, however, he declares that his family's honor has always depended on him. Furious, he questions why his wife had to give birth to a good-for-nothing. He tries to hit her with a chair, but fails. This is because the protagonist used his ability to protect his mother. Furthermore, he draws his sword and pushes his father away with a strike. After this, the old man realizes that the boy was in fact lying. He then says that the boy is finally learning to be a man, but still has a long way to go to achieve that goal. Next, he goes on the attack and manages to break the protagonist's sword. Not only that, but he also delivers a powerful blow. Bai realizes that he is in fact no match for such superior power and feels his entire body aching. His father, in turn, states that he does not like to be challenged and does not hesitate to use force. The protagonist stands firm and does not dodge the attack. His father says that the boy is brave, but claims that it is useless after all. He is still weak. Bai in turn thinks that he will not allow any tragedy to repeat itself in this life and endures whatever comes. His father, on the other hand, is venting all his anger, stating that he is the one in charge of that house. However, someone knocks on the door just as he was at the peak of his fury. Annoyed, the old man asks who is disturbing him. He opens the door and is surprised because on the other side are the vice captain of the inspection force and an allied investigator. The protagonist's father asks what they are doing there. Luing explains that they received a report that a dangerous fugitive was seen in that area, and they're knocking door to door until they find him. The old man claims he has not seen anyone suspicious around, otherwise he would have already reported it. However, the vice captain sees the protagonist and asks what happened to the boy. The father says that the boy fell on his way home, but there is nothing to worry about. However, the protagonist speaks up, claiming that his father did that to him. Upon hearing this, the old man cannot believe that the brat actually said that in front of the police. Minutes before entering the house, Bai had already made an anonymous phone call to report the situation. He imagined he only needed to buy enough time for the authorities to arrive. His father tried to hide his reaction to Bai's statement. However, Bai continued, describing his father's actions in detail and stating he was willing to testify and undergo a physical examination. He also claimed that the law is explicit regarding the treatment of awakened individuals who cannot control their strength. The police officers were surprised by the boy's knowledge and the clarity of the details he presented. Given the evidence, the vice captain ordered the protagonist's father arrested, deeming the situation clear. Furious, the father tried to attack the boy, but was restrained by the officers. As he was being led away, he promised that this would not go unpunished. Next, the protagonist's mother hugged him tightly. He felt happy that he had managed to protect her this time, but he knew his father would be detained for a maximum of 15 days. He pondered that he would need to resolve the situation definitively or everything would go back to how it was before. During the commotion, the protagonist took the opportunity to grab his father's key. This key opened a safe that his father kept hidden. After all, his father had betrayed his own companions in the past because of this safe. That was what allowed him to ascend and obtain a higher class. In his past life, Bai only discovered these details after his father's death, as his father kept everything a secret. Now, however, he believed that possessing such an artifact would give him the necessary advantage. With a dagger like this, it would be possible to clear demonic layers and level up quickly. The only problem was that all layers were under the control of the Divine Squad, which only accepted guild members. Despite this, there were smaller layers managed by Bai's school. He had known about one of these hidden layers in his past life. Therefore, he considered it best to deal with this quickly to strengthen himself. Meanwhile, at the police station, the officers regretted that the lead on the criminal Snow had turned out to be false. Regardless, the captain claimed they couldn't let their guard down because if Snow were truly at large on the squad's anniversary, it would be a real scandal. At that moment, the protagonist's father tried to convince the police officers to release him. He said that if he were released, he could intercede with a friend who managed the best maternity hospital in the region, as the captain's wife was pregnant. However, Ling stated that he would not be easily bribed. He mentioned that Mr. Bai had once been a guild member and wondered how he had ended up in that situation. The investigator claimed that attempting to bribe a police officer would only worsen the father's situation. Upon hearing this, the father became even more irritated with his son. Returning to the protagonist, he entered a lair. He thought that once discovered, guilds usually set up garrisons in these locations. Demonic lays filled with beasts and demonic or OES were the best option for the newly awakened to evolve. However, due to the dangers, novices always entered in teams, accompanied by a more experienced officer. In his past life, this lair remained hidden for 5 years and was only discovered after an incident when the accumulated monsters managed to escape and invade the surroundings. A lair like this usually required 3 rank E awakened individuals. A more dangerous lair, however, required a team of 5 people with at least 2 rank D awakened individuals. The protagonist hoped this lair would be rank F, as he would then be able to clear the area alone. He crossed the entrance, even aware of the dangers ahead. He thought there was no alternative but to evolve as quickly as possible. After all, for him, the greatest danger did not lie in a lair, but in his own home. Upon entering the lair, the protagonist realized it was a frigid dungeon. Therefore, there could only be cloud-type demons. He approached and realized he wasn't the first human to enter that place. He encountered an ice bear-type demonic beast, which was hibernating. The protagonist noticed that the place was more dangerous than he had imagined. To make matters worse, one of the beasts advanced upon sensing his presence. At that moment, he realized that a mere snow wolf was stronger than him. Regardless, he knew he wouldn't leave without a fight. So, he tried to dodge enemy attacks to counterattack as soon as he found an opening. In this way, he managed to strike the wolf and achieve his first victory. Next, he realized that his father's hidden dagger was perfect for compensating for his lack of power. After all, it was an item that couldn't be bought on a market. Despite this, he concluded that he would need to eliminate about 20 wolves like that one to advance to the next level. And to move to the next rank, 10 more levels would be required. Then he saw the wolf pack approaching. He realized that the smell of blood had attracted them. Regardless, this was the group he needed to complete his task, so he wouldn't run now. The protagonist finds himself surrounded by wolves. Instead of retreating, he takes the initiative and goes on the offensive. He uses his agility to perform quick dodges and counterattacks with equal speed. His speed is so great that the wolves are unable to keep up with him. In a short time, he defeats his enemies. Finally, only the Wolf King remains, who is also defeated in a matter of seconds. With this victory, the protagonist ascends directly to rank D. However, he feels a deep exhaustion as his stamina is no longer what it once was. Furthermore, the protagonist considers that a dimensional backpack would be extremely useful because without it, many valuable items would have to be left behind. Most demonic layers are monopolized by guild squads, which makes evolving outside of them a considerable challenge for the awakened. For many, joining a squad becomes the only viable alternative. Schools for the awakened are managed by guild squads and function as a rigorous selection process. Most students dream of being selected. However, being expelled from a squad implies the impossibility of evolving again, as happened with the protagonist's father, who remained stagnant at rank C after his expulsion. Bai realizes that the cold is intensifying and that he is expending an excessive amount of energy. He decides then to speed up the process. He lures the wolves out of the cave. At the same time, he knocks down some nearby trees, using the environment to his advantage. However, by performing this maneuver, he inadvertently attracts the attention of a larger monster. A group of cloud serpents appears and manages to surround him. However, an explosion erupts right in front of the monsters. The protagonist assumes that with all this commotion, the larger monster must have awakened. He is not mistaken because immediately afterward, the hibernating bear awakens and appears right in front of him. Not only that, but the bear shows itself to be enraged and begins to attack everything in its path, including the other monsters in the dungeon. Bai takes advantage of the situation to accumulate points, exploiting the openings that arise. The protagonist observes that although they are strong, these beasts lack great intelligence. The bear in turn saved him considerable work by drawing attention to itself. Thus, Bai takes the opportunity to deliver only the final blow to the creatures. However, even with the bear's help, the task still proves exhausting for him. He decides, therefore, to speed up the process. He realizes that with such destruction, the area is considerably shaken. Therefore, he waits for as many monsters as possible to approach and then breaks the ice floor. Upon observing the scenario carefully, Bai noticed that he was on an ice bridge. Therefore, by destroying it, he not only secured some eliminations, but also created a strategic distance between himself and the monsters. Despite having defeated most of the monsters, one still remains. For this reason, he reserved his remaining energy to face the final boss. After all, every layer has a boss confrontation, and this one would be no different. However, the protagonist knows that in this location there's a monster even more dangerous than the bear. He imagines, however, that such a monster should have already manifested after so much commotion. In any case, he is now facing the bear. However, before he could act, Bai sees more ice approaching and realizes he was not mistaken. The monster was not hibernating. It was merely waiting for the most opportune moment to attack. It froze the bear and cornered the protagonist in a trap. Upon realizing the situation, Bai tries to escape. However, his foot is frozen, preventing his escape. He can no longer cross as the bridge has been destroyed. Thus, he realizes that he has fallen perfectly into the enemy's trap. And despite the lair being low level, the location is inhabited by an intelligent boss. Subsequently, he encounters the demonic sorcerer and his minions, the snow monkeys. Bai definitely did not expect such a turn of events, as he was placed in an extremely difficult situation to escape. Surrounded by the demonic wizard and his minions, the protagonist was in a critical situation. Frozen, Bai could not move, and his body was rapidly losing energy. At that moment, The wizard ordered one of his monkeys to attack. Bai remained completely still, as there wasn't much he could do. Then he was attacked by the monkey. However, Bai used the attack to his advantage. The monkey's blow broke the ice that held him. Although he used his powers to protect himself, he still emerged wounded as he wasn't at 100% of his energy. In any case, Bai realized that it would take some time for the wizard to conjure another powerful spell. Therefore, he concluded that he should defeat him before that happened. However, the already precarious situation worsened with the appearance of a bear. The protagonist thought that if it was already difficult before, with the help of reinforcements, the enemy had become even stronger. Furthermore, Bai's vigor was extremely low. All of this combined drastically reduced his chances of victory. Even so, he continued fighting, but he realized that he wouldn't last much longer as his strength was depleting. He dodged attacks as best he could. However, the environment was so cold that a large part of his energy dissipated just to keep his body warm. To make matters worse, the wizard kept attacking and summoned an ice storm. Bai noticed that the wizard's cool down time was faster than he had imagined. In his past life, he had faced all kinds of situations, and through these repeated challenges, he had developed a keen perception for recognizing opportunities. But now Bai realized he only had two options: stay and continue fighting to his limit, which wasn't very viable, as the chances of victory were practically zero, or flee while he still could. Given this, the protagonist ran towards the abyss. Before falling, he ended up being frozen. Even the wizard was surprised to see that Bai's plans involved using the ice to cushion the impact of his fall, and with that, he went straight to the bottom of the abyss. Meanwhile, at home, Bai's mother thought he was sleeping in, but she was surprised to find her son's bed empty. The protagonist had left a note saying he had gone to a friend's house. However, his mother knew him well and thought that if it were true, Bai wouldn't need to leave a note, as he could have spoken to her directly. She realized that ever since he had arrived home the day before, he seemed like a different person. Therefore, she wondered what had happened to her son. Returning to the protagonist, he thought that when the ice bridge broke, nearly 100 demonic beasts fell with it. At that time, he had only leveled up 3 times, which meant that about half of the beasts died, while the other half were still alive even after the fall, thinking there would be a river at the bottom of the cliff. He decided to take a risk and therefore jumped. However, even though he survived, he still took damage and thought he might have pushed himself to his limit. As the protagonist felt on the verge of defeat, something unexpected emerged to worsen his situation. A saber-toothed tiger known as Lord Glacial found him. In that instant, Bai recalled the past, the moments of camaraderie with his friends, moments he had left behind when he returned and started from scratch. The only advantage of that choice was being able to see his mother again. However, this fragile reality was about to crumble. If he perished now, his father would return home, leaving his mother completely vulnerable. Furthermore, Bai would not achieve his revenge against the traitor who annihilated his team. He refused to succumb in that way. He needed to act, even if it meant overcoming his own limits. With determination, he grabbed one of the tiger's fangs, swearing to himself that he would not allow history to repeat itself. Bai gathered all his strength and with a precise blow defeated the tiger. In this way, he managed to get up. However, that was a tiger's den, and soon the others emerged, ready for battle. However, the protagonist knew that it was in moments of life or death that a class advancement could be awakened. What didn't kill him, in fact, made him stronger. Although he was surrounded by powerful enemies, the protagonist was filled with adrenaline. He realized that the acquired bonus was not enough to level up, but in return, he had gained a new ability. It was time then to test this power in practice, as the first target was right in front of him. Bai wasted no time and executed the move called Sanctuary. All the surrounding creatures felt the pressure of his strength. With a single attack, he managed to take down several monsters, and consequently, his attributes increased. In this way, he felt more prepared to return to the boss and clear the dungeon. The monsters now became significantly weaker as Bai was at rank 8, and even the cold no longer bothered him. His Sanctuary move absorbed all enemy attacks and returned them at once to the attackers, but it was a resource that could not be used constantly. In any case, Bai had recovered his vigor. Reflecting, he barely knew how long he had been in there and thought it best to return home soon. At the top of the hill, the boss rested. He had a cabin he used as a refuge along with his allies. However, his tranquility was abruptly interrupted as the protagonist appeared and declared he was there to settle his scores. At the protagonist's house, his mother was worried, not knowing where her son had gone and fearing that something bad might have happened. Meanwhile, Bai had just invaded the boss's cabin. He threw the bear at the enemy's dwelling, destroying a considerable portion of it. Upon encountering the boss again, Bai immediately showed that he was not to be trifled with. The enemy, however, was unfazed and ordered his servants to attack Bai. This time Bai was visibly stronger. He not only defended himself, but also attacked and eliminated the enemies with ease. Annoyed, the sorcerer launched an ice storm at him. However, unlike the first time, Bai was immune to the attack and was not frozen. Realizing the ineffectiveness of his magic, the sorcerer resorted to other measures, summoning more monkey minions. However, Bai was determined to defeat him as he knew this victory would allow him to reach rank D. Attacking with greater intensity, he managed to hit the hand the enemy used to cast spells, preventing the mage from continuing his magic. With the mage vulnerable, Bai attacked to eliminate him once and for all. In this way, he gained a lot of experience and advanced to rank D. Furthermore, he noticed that he had accumulated enough cloud elemental energy to earn a bonus. This meant he had acquired a new red class profession, being able to switch between them at any time. He also obtained good items from the monsters and gained more space in his inventory. Even after defeating the dungeon boss, Bai decided not to leave before eliminating all remaining monsters. He took the opportunity to test his new ability before leaving the cave. Sometime later, Bai's mother was still worried at home until he finally returned. She was already believing that something bad had happened, but Bai entered, apologized for the delay, and showed that he was fine. Immediately, his mother hugged him. To console her, Bai said he had a proposal and asked her to listen to what he had to say. As soon as he reunited with his mother, Bai suggested they move to a better place. He had collected valuable items in the dungeon and knew he could get a considerable sum by selling them. Bai presented one of the stones to a buyer. The buyer appreciated the item, but considered Bai's initial price quite high, arguing that a stone of that type wasn't worth so much. After some negotiation, they both reached an agreement. With the money obtained, Bai imagined he could rent a much more suitable place to live. He recalled that in his past life, his mother had never had a single day of peace. Now, he wanted to act differently and provide her with the utmost comfort. Bai managed to secure a good rental agreement, ensuring them a decent place to live. Seeing his mother so happy, he realized it had been a long time since he had last seen her smile. With the housing issue resolved, Bai decided to focus on strengthening himself. He knew that his father, even incarcerated, still posed a threat. He needed to resolve this issue before embarking on a new journey. He managed to craft a bracelet with a magical stone, believing it would help him fulfill his purpose. Far from there, a group of adventurers entered a dungeon. One of the members praised the leader's performance. The leader's sister offered him water and suggested a break. However, the leader refused, stating that they needed to go to the demonic lair to train while there was still time. The leader named Ding. Ding believed that no one would surpass him in the simulated combat test, as he considered himself a true genius. Meanwhile, a woman analyzed the list of awakened novices. She noticed that none of them had reached the gold level class that year. Consequently, she concluded that there would be nothing exciting during the simulation. Back to Bai, he woke up in his new apartment and found breakfast prepared by his mother. Bai asked why his mother hadn't woken him up. She replied that she hadn't had the heart to wake him, as he seemed very tired. She added that occasionally being late for the sake of sleep and food wouldn't hurt. Bai himself realized that indeed it had been a long time since he had slept or eaten so well. His mother asked if he needed any new books or toys. Bai questioned why his mother wanted to give him a gift for no apparent reason. His mother explained that it wasn't without reason, as his birthday was approaching. At that moment, Bai remembered his birthday. He had forgotten the date because he hadn't celebrated it for so long. While eating, he reflected on the matter. However, he concluded that he didn't need presents as he already possessed everything he desired. His only true goal was to achieve his long-desired revenge. After the weekend, the students returned to school. The teacher announced that it was time to train for the simulated combat. He added that as the school was subordinate to the Divine Guild, they would be under constant observation. The simulated combat was the first stage where everyone presented themselves after awakening, functioning as the final assessment of elementary school and would be broadcast live. Furthermore, whoever excelled would have the chance to participate in the training journey alongside advanced high school students. This journey represented the fastest way to get closer to the Divine Guild. The school gathered the best elementary and high school students to travel to the sacred country where the Divine Guild's headquarters were located. Upon hearing this, Bai recalled that it was in that place he had met his old master. However, it was also the place where the traitor had been born. Nevertheless, they never got to know each other, as the traitor joined the squad much later. In any case, Bai realized that if he wanted to meet them again, he would need to excel in this assessment to be admitted to the advanced training journey. Bai might be the only one motivated by revenge, but he wasn't the only student aiming for victory. Noticing the general excitement, the teacher announced the start of the test. He explained that the first stage would be physical conditioning. The students should enter the gravity room and perform 10 sets of zigzag running. While the others competed to be the first to enter, Bai made a different decision. He informed the teacher that he would not like to use that room. The professor was surprised by Bai's request. However, he warned that despite Bai's talent, it did not exempt him from evaluation. Bai, however, clarified that he was not running away, but rather seeking a different type of evaluation. The professor then questioned if Bai was implying that his teaching method was inadequate. Bai argued that physical preparation was important, but its usefulness was restricted to specific classes. He suggested that mages and sorcerers would benefit much more from training in an elemental room, as each class required special attention. Upon hearing this, Qian realized that the method described by Bai was identical to what instructor Danyang from the Divine Squad had suggested. However, this was very recent information which she only knew through her father. Qian wondered how her classmate could have access to such knowledge. Contrary to what the other students expected, the professor was not annoyed with Bai. In fact, he found a young man's suggestion quite interesting. He explained, however, that with so many students in the school, it was difficult to adapt individual training in such a short time. For a teacher, deciding between guiding a student's training or allowing them to follow their own path was a great dilemma. Bai reflected that in his past life, he had been fortunate enough to find good teachers. Without them, he would never have ascended the ranks. He knew he could trust his masters, and now he asked the professor to trust him, too. The professor decided to allow Bai to train in his own way, but asked what his plans were. Bai replied that he wished to set the elemental room's pressure to the maximum level. Knowing he could not reveal the truth, he explained that despite being a warrior, he wanted to balance his skills and improve his weaknesses. At that moment, Qi-yin, his classmate, declared that she also wanted to use the elemental room as she was a mage. She asked to train with Bai, but he preferred to do it alone. Upon being rejected, Qi-yin stated that she would use that as motivation to prove her worth and earn Bai's trust. As Bai and Qi headed to the elemental room, the nerdy classmate thought he would have to work very hard to reach their level. Back to Bai, he was alone in the elemental room, determined to use the space to acquire new skills away from curious eyes. After all, everything that happened there was monitored, and only in a room like that could he obtain skills from other classes without raising suspicion. Exposing himself otherwise would put a target on his back. As for the other students, Bai decided it would be better not to get involved with them. After class, Bai tried to go home alone. However, he was caught up by his classmates. He thought that in his past life, the three of them were best friends and always walked together as they were the school's outcasts. Now, however, he only thought of his revenge and believed that friendships would only hinder his goal. His nerdy classmate began to notice that ever since the awakening exam, Bai was different and no longer wanted to hang out with him. Even so, Bai approached the nerd and advised him to get his lungs checked as soon as possible. Then he got on his bicycle and left, leaving the two students confused. Bai recalled that in his past life, his classmate had been diagnosed with a lung disease that, due to being discovered late, led him to perish early. The nerd in turn felt that although Bai had changed his behavior, there was still something good coming from him. The scene shifts to the sacred realm, specifically to a novice training ground. One of the veterans comments that he heard a new recruit from the Divine Squad has been showing remarkable performance. Facing the recruit, he asks if it's true that the young man broke all records. The recruit, who is actually the protagonist enemy, replies that Lord Danyang is exaggerating as he is only there to formally introduce himself. Turning to Bai, he asks his mother to avoid going out at night, explaining that from now on, he will do the shopping on his way back home, so she doesn't have to worry. Bai reflects that he needs to ensure his mother's safety in a stable environment as quickly as possible because he knows what is about to happen. Meanwhile, in the prison where Bai's father is being held, he devised a plan with the canteen leader. He bribed him to gain an advantage and negotiated a way to escape from prison. The next day, Bai is at his school. He is progressing in his mage class and can already manipulate elemental force to his advantage. His friends try to interact with him, but Bai continues to ignore them. He tells them that instead of wasting time with him, they should train to become stronger. In a way, they interpret these words as encouragement. In turn, the nerdy classmate decided to follow Bai's advice and went to the school infirmary. The doctor in charge soon detected the boy's lung disease and advised him to schedule surgery as soon as possible. Upon hearing this, the nerd wonders how Bai knew about his condition. After all, he himself had no idea of his condition, and if it weren't for Bai, he wouldn't have discovered it so soon. After the consultation, the nerd overhears a suspicious conversation in the school corridors. One of the boys comments that Chanjin cheated again and has already risen to rank 4, reaching first place in the evaluation. After all, he possesses a private dungeon to evolve. They also recall the boy who provoked Chongshang recently. They claim that Chongshang plans revenge against the novice and is about to set up an ambush. After all, a spoiled boy would not accept being humiliated without retaliating. Furthermore, he is armed and intends to carry out his plan outside the school so as not to suffer any kind of punishment. Upon hearing everything, the nerd ran to warn Bei. He imagined that outside of school, no one could interfere with the revenge plot. He feared that even if Bai was strong, he could be caught by surprise and incapacitated before reacting. Although he always avoided conflicts, this time the nerd decided not to be a coward. He headed to the school's armory and broke the chains. His hope was to compensate for his lack of skills with a magical weapon. To protect a friend, he was willing to suffer the consequences. However, he was surprised to be discovered. Qian appeared and asked where the boy thought he was going with a stolen weapon. The nerd replied that he needed to save Bei. At this, Qi became confused by the information. Meanwhile, the protagonist Bai was returning home and entered an alley with his bicycle. Since leaving school, he had noticed he was being followed and told Hong Changshang to stop hiding. Then the bully Hong Changshang revealed himself and declared that he would finally settle the score for what happened last week. Bai asked if he was truly confident that the outcome would be different this time. His opponent replied affirmatively and launched an attack, stating that no amount of training would protect the protagonist from his blow. To Hong Changshang's surprise, Bai managed to defend himself without any difficulty. The opponent questioned if this was really happening, as he hadn't imagined he would be defeated by Bai again. In turn, Bai replied that his opponent hadn't been the only one to grow stronger. Bei thought there was something Hong Chongzheng hadn't noticed the first time they fought. But at that moment, Hong Chongzheng finally understood that Bei was far above his level and he would never be able to catch up. Hong Chongzhen, still in shock, asked Bei how he had managed to level up so quickly. He himself had trained intensely outside of school, dedicating himself to the fullest, and even so, he had barely achieved the expected results. Therefore, he couldn't understand how a boy without the same resources could have progressed more than him. In response, Bai stated that the spoiled boy didn't know the true meaning of effort and questioned if he had ever died in his life. Frightened, Hong Chongzheng asked if Bai intended to eliminate him once and for all. The protagonist replied that although he didn't like being pursued, he didn't hate the spoiled boy. He added that instead of preparing a decent ambush, he preferred to act alone, believing that would be enough to win. Annoyed, Hong Changshang declared that if the protagonist didn't eliminate him at that moment, he wouldn't give up on defeating him and that they would soon meet again. At that instant, the protagonist's classmates arrived at the scene. However, they realized that Hong Chong had already been defeated. Bai then told his opponent that he had a proposal for him. He stated that he could show him a path to become stronger and faster. But for that, Hong Chongsheng would have to offer something in return. Sometime later, back at school, the teacher announced the end of the training week and that the combat simulation was about to begin. However, before that, he issued an important warning. Despite being called a combat simulation, the place they were going was a real demonic lair. Much of the danger had been sealed by barriers, but it was still no joke. Therefore, students should be cautious of the creatures inhabiting it. To assist, senior high school students would accompany the novices, but they would only interfere if necessary, as the main objective was to ensure everyone's safety. Teams would consist of 4 to 5 students, with a veteran leading each group into a dungeon. Each could choose between rank F or rank E demonic layers. However, those who were not prepared should not face the more difficult challenge, as they risked losing credits in addition to failing the mission. Next, the teacher allowed the students to make their decisions and asked those who felt confident enough to face the more difficult layer to raise their hands. Qi was the first to speak up. Hong Chongzhen did the same immediately after. The teacher informed them that out of 180 students, only 8 had accepted the rank LA challenge. Therefore, the rest would be distributed among the rank F layers. However, the protagonist spoke up and declared that he wished to challenge a rank D spiritual J demonic layer. After the protagonist Bai made such an unusual request, the professor was left speechless. Not only him, but all the other students were also astonished. In turn, the professor questioned, "What kind of crazy idea is that?" At that moment, Hong Ling intervened, arguing that dank layers are meant for veterans, too dangerous for a novice. He declared that he would not allow such a risk. Still, Bai countered, stating that according to the school's rules, there is no explicit prohibition. Each student has the freedom to choose the rank they wish to challenge. He added that the institution's focus is to discover exceptional talents for the Divine Squad, and that such talents are defined by courage, strength, a sense of responsibility, and a natural gift. He then questioned whether the director would truly take away his chance to prove his worth. Hong felt cornered, but argued that to enter the lair, it was mandatory to be in a team. Insistently, Bai stated that he could manage on his own. However, the director reiterated that according to the rules, forming a team was essential for the student's own safety. Next, Chi-in spoke up, declaring that she would go with Bai. The director hesitated to allow it, claiming that the girl's father would not approve. However, Chi-in stated that she did not want to be left behind and also wished to have the chance to get the highest score. In turn, Bai refused to help, insisting that he would go alone. However, the professor intervened, saying that refusing was not an option. If Bai truly wanted to go to D-rank lair, he would have to agree to go in a team. Now, a veteran was missing, but the professor didn't know who he should send along until a student spoke up, stating that someone needed to do it and offered to accompany the novices. At that moment, the professor introduced the student Zealing and asked him to look after the young ones. Chi-in commented that this veteran had almost joined the school's guild. Meanwhile, Bai thought that he had never heard of that young man. On the other hand, Zealing thought that Bai was just a boy wanting to show off in front of everyone, and that he barely knew what was coming. In any case, the professor declared that with the team formed, they could proceed to the test. He added that inside the lair, camera drones would accompany them to broadcast everything live. As a professor, he strived to keep all students motivated and expressed his eagerness to know who would achieve the highest score this year. Bai was fully aware that the awakened school had been built upon an ancient and vast demon lair, which had been conquered long ago. The middle and high school sections were integrated into the same complex. This main lair had spawned numerous smaller ones, ideal for students to use in their combat tests. Most of these secondary layers range from F to D ranks. The moment a student entered the instance, the combat simulation officially began. However, all the action was broadcast live, and every moment was recorded. For this reason, Bai pondered that he needed to be cautious not to expose all his abilities in front of strangers. In any case, the spiritual Jade Demon lair was his main target. Once inside the lair, Zealing stated that he would protect the others as he had faced a place like that before. Chi-in asked if the monsters in that place were truly strong. Zealing replied yes, but pointed out that the school had sealed off the most dangerous monsters, making the emergence of something truly threatening, like a boss, unlikely. However, he warned Chi not to underestimate the other monsters because even with the most dangerous ones sealed, those that remained were considerably powerful. Zealing claimed that as a veteran, it was his duty to protect the novices, and therefore he would help them earn some student credits. Next, Zealing noticed the protagonist advancing alone without waiting for him. He warned that if Bai continued like that, he would end up attracting monsters. In turn, the protagonist declared that he was fed up with so much talk. He added that he didn't need help and asked Zealing not to get in his way. Zealing was dumbfounded by such audacity. In any case, everything that happened there was broadcast live. Everyone at the school, whether students or teachers, could follow what was happening in the layers. Meanwhile, at the school guild, the guild's vice leader was watching the broadcast and commented that he had found something quite interesting. He explained that this year, there was a freshman who had deliberately chosen a D-rank lair. His boss asked what class that student belonged to. The vice leader replied that the boy belonged to the Green Warrior class, considered the most useless of all, and expressed a desire to follow him to discover the source of such confidence. Meanwhile, one of the students was terrified. He was terrified because he was in the Frank dungeon, the weakest in the school. His teammate reminded him that as a caster, he should stay in the back, offering support, and that there was no need for so much tension. Then the student asked how an F-rank dungeon, considered weak, could be so frightening. Little did he know that elsewhere the students in the E-rank dungeon were facing much greater difficulties. A group had just been ambushed and was being tended to by a healer. In this scenario, Hong Changjin spoke up, stating that he would fight alone if necessary. After all, his goal was to surpass his rival. Meanwhile, inside the D-rank dungeon, Bei Yi, the protagonist, was facing powerful monsters and defeating them one by one. Impressed, Chi, his teammate, asked how he had managed to do all that by himself. Bai explained that the monsters there were sealed, only able to use half of their strength, and therefore were not as powerful as they seemed. Nevertheless, Chi-in was delighted by the explanation and stated that even with her best efforts, she was still far from reaching him. Bai advised her not to worry about others, but about herself, because only then would she truly evolve. Upon hearing this, Chi-in found him even cooler and promised that she would do her best to catch up to him one day. Unlike her, Zealing did not like this arrogant attitude at all. He stated that both of them were in a D-ranked dungeon and warned the protagonist about the dangers, advising him not to boast excessively. He added that the boy had only beginner's luck, but that if he cooperated, he could receive some tips from a senior. For his part, Bai completely ignored the older student and instructed Chi to take care of the monsters on the right. While he headed to the left, he proceeded towards his objective, leaving the senior talking to himself. Bai informed his teammate that the monsters on the right seemed weaker and asked if she could handle them alone. He explained that this simulated combat served to test each person's individual skill, so she would have to start acting if she won a good grade. Chien understood and said she would do her best. While the two were getting organized, the senior was fuming with rage. He thought that the arrogant boy was just complicating things. The protagonist's performance was observed from afar. The teachers could barely keep up with the other students who were completely engrossed in Bai's feats. By this point, everyone already knew that Bai himself had requested to be sent to an F-rank dungeon. Observers noted that Bai had directed Chi-in to the opposite side. Realizing that the girl, being a flower type, could effectively deal with monsters of the same category, Bai's teacher understood that the young man knew exactly what he was doing and concluded that indeed he was not boasting without reason. Previously, Bai had noticed that star-type monsters were emerging from the cave on the right. These monsters, besides being low-level, were weak against the flower element, the class representative's specialty. Aware of this, he allowed Chin to fight alone as he believed she would be able to defend herself in a way he was not mistaken. As a mage, she possessed the appropriate skills to face those monsters and therefore was able to defeat them with relative ease. Bai knew that at E rank, mages acquired a basic skill specific to their class. Chi-Yin's skill allowed her to use plants to create a poisonous barrier. However, for her first time in a dungeon, facing higher-level monsters alone and still maintaining her composure was truly surprising. Bai thought that the D-rank monsters should all be sealed and considered that he could let Chi-Yin handle the rear. This way, he imagined he would achieve a high score without revealing his true strength live. However, it would not be possible to continue if he were constantly followed by the transmission equipment. While Bai pondered how to proceed, the senior Zeeling remained in his corner, consumed by rage. Zeeling did not like being ignored and now intended to do something to hinder the protagonist. At that instant, he shot an arrow in Kain's direction. The arrow did not hit the girl, but passed right by her and went into a cave. When questioned by Chin, the senior Zeeling claimed he only wanted to grant a buff, but she had dodged. His lie might have gone unnoticed, but the arrow did not, as it served to awaken a monster that was dormant in the cave. A two-headed lion, much stronger than the common monsters of that dungeon, was now furious and about to unleash its wrath. The protagonist immediately realizes the gravity of the situation, noticing that his colleague is in trouble. She tries to use her magic to contain the creature, but her efforts are insufficient. She is left at the mercy of the monster's attacks. Zeeling in turn laughs at the situation, satisfied with the chaos he caused. In contrast, Bai acts quickly in defense of Chi-Yin. He realizes that the creature has not been contained and decides to intervene before the worst happens. However, Bai only manages to wound the monster without killing it. He concludes that the creature is faster than he imagined. Observing closely, Zeeling reflects that he knows the dungeon like no one else. He knew exactly where the two-headed lion was and the dangers it posed. That's why he didn't hesitate to release the monster to disrupt the protagonist's plans. Furthermore, Zeeling even strengthened the creature with his own ability. Realizing the abnormality of the situation, Bai considers using his full strength as he sees no other alternative. He then orders Chi-Yin to retreat, explaining that she won't be able to help at that moment. The monster, without wasting time, attacks. However, instead of retreating, Chi-Yin tries to help with her magic. She casts magical roots to bind the creature and creates a wall of vines with 3 layers of protection. Even Bai is surprised by her action. The girl states that although Bai doesn't think it's a good idea, she can help him defeat the monster. Despite the danger, Chi-Yin insists on fighting. Upon witnessing this, the veteran thinks that the girl was almost swallowed just now. He wonders what drives her to persist in facing the monster, despite the risk. The protagonist himself confesses that he expected Chi-Yin to freeze in fear, but he realizes that the girl possesses greater emotional strength than she appears to have. Chi-Yin declares that she worked too hard to get there and will not give up at this point. Chi-Yin added that as long as Bai was by her side, she would not die. Bai in turn warned that the power of the 3 layers, though useful, was limited and advised her not to overdo it. He recalled that the Chi-Yin from his past life had been brilliant since elementary school. Always optimistic and confident, she was also generous. Although she came from a powerful family, she was always kind to everyone, which led her to be elected class representative given the trust she inspired. After that period, Bai lost contact with her, assuming she had led a normal life. Now, however, he felt he could trust Jiyin, and if no unforeseen events occurred, he might be able to overcome the situation without revealing his true power. Observing the scene, the veteran doubted that the two could defeat the monster. After all, he believed that excessive confidence was not enough to win battles. With such limited powers, it was impossible for novices to defeat such a powerful creature. He imagined it was only a matter of time until they begged for help. Next, the monster managed to free itself from the roots. Bai announced that he would distract the monster, asking Qi to attack the lion at the right moment, aiming for its core. He moved away. He believed that because he had wounded it, he would be the creature's main target. Certain of his strategy, Bai ran toward the lake and jumped into the water without hesitation. He dove deep, but the monster followed him. However, Bai had attracted the monster exactly where he wanted it. As soon as he gave the signal, Qi used the magical vines again, trapping the creature. The monster was now vulnerable to attacks, and seeing itself trapped fell into despair. Qi with the vines completely immobilized the lion, leaving it unable to move. Furthermore, she applied poison to weaken it even further. Bai realized that the lion would no longer be able to free itself. Then he stated that this was the perfect moment to complete the test with a maximum score. Xiling gaped at the scene, unable to believe what he was seeing. After all, not even he, an experienced veteran, could immobilize such a powerful creature. Realizing his plan had failed, Xiling felt annoyed, but acknowledged there was little he could do. In the broadcast booth, the director watched everything along with the other team members. The protagonist professor praised his students' reaction time and demonstrated leadership. For him, there was no doubt who would achieve the maximum score in that test. He and the others speculated that if the full recording were sent for guild analysis, they might even break the historical score record. However, amidst this anticipation, the transmission was suddenly cut. Xiling had intentionally knocked down the drone, believing that this way, Bai wouldn't achieve the maximum score. He assumed the protagonist hadn't yet noticed the drone's fall, as he had seen him distracted talking with his colleague. Xiling approached and declared that they were finished and could therefore leave the dungeon. After all, he himself couldn't stand staying there any longer. In turn, Bai stated that the veteran knew exactly what he was doing by awakening the sleeping beast. Xiling claimed that wasn't the case, as he was just trying to give the girl a bonus, but she dodged. However, the protagonist retorted that as a veteran archer, Xiling should have come up with a more convincing excuse. Qian agreed, saying that made sense and that she now understood why the veteran hadn't managed to join the school guild. Annoyed, Xiling asked if he was being accused of something. The protagonist stepped forward, protecting his colleague. Even annoyed, Xiling knew he couldn't act rashly. However, he declared that it wasn't over yet and promised to see them again. On the way out of the dungeon, the protagonist spotted the destroyed drone. Qi began to realize that the veteran had only served to sabotage them. However, instead of lamenting, the protagonist saw an opportunity. He claimed that he now had the chance to do what was left since no one was watching. His colleague asked what that meant. In response, the protagonist led her to the previous portal. He asked the class representative to keep what had happened a secret, but he believed that even if she told, no one would believe her. Confused, Qian asked what he was talking about. In his last meeting with Hong Chan-jin, the protagonist had requested an item, the demonic stone necessary to break the seals the boy's uncle guarded. With that stone in his possession, the protagonist had everything he needed in place and could now undo the dungeon seal. Qian didn't think that was a good idea. After all, it was a rank D dungeon, and breaking the seal would release Heil beasts all at once. The protagonist knew this very well and was counting on that situation. But he reassured his colleague, claiming that even with the seal broken, the creatures would still have their powers reduced. Even so, Qian argued that just the two of them wouldn't be enough to defeat so many enemies. However, the protagonist stated that he would do it alone. Qian was truly startled when she noticed something. She saw that the protagonist had suddenly changed to the mage class and asked how he had done that. The protagonist Bai, he asked his colleague Qi to wait outside. Then he undid the barrier and the monsters appeared. Bai stood before the creatures. Qian watched apprehensive about his safety. However, the protagonist knew exactly what he was doing. He used his mage ability to freeze the enemies. The creatures were immediately incapacitated. She was deeply impressed by such power, especially since she herself had barely managed to defeat a single lion. Seeing her colleague freeze several enemies at once with such ease left her in shock. In turn, Bai explained that those monsters sealed for so long must have been on the verge of exploding. He stated that he needed more space. Quickly, Qian moved away, allowing her colleague to act. A short time later, new monsters appeared. This time, they were wild flame leopards. The protagonist noticed that although these monsters were ranked D, the long period of sealing had reduced their strength by half. So, he again used his freezing ability to control the enemies. The instant he saw another enemy approach, he quickly exited the mage class and switched to warrior mode, as he now needed to fight hand-to-hand instead of using magic. They thought the enemies would try to catch him off guard. However, the monsters were not as cunning as he was. At that moment, the protagonist switched back to mage mode and managed to freeze the leopard. Witnessing all this, Qian was shocked by her colleague's ability to switch classes and with such speed. Now she understood why Bai had desired so much privacy in the elemental room. Considering that the basis of the mage class is to release energy as forces of nature or manipulate objects of the same element, it made sense to practice in an elemental room. Qian believed that the more mana she had and the more time she could cast spells, the stronger she would be. However, upon seeing Bai fight, she concluded that the most important thing was control. Elemental power coming from nature is raw, wild, and difficult to master. Only by completely mastering one's own elemental power can one create more varied movements. He could use a basic ability in so many different ways that it was impressive. Not only that, but Qian realized that unlike her colleague possessed total mastery of the mage class. Qian admits the truth. Her colleague had long surpassed everyone else. Instead of frustration, she feels even greater admiration. Soon after, an even more powerful monster emerges, a level 15 infernal mammoth. The protagonist, however, is not surprised as he had already anticipated such a challenge. He prepares for battle, switching to the warrior class. He imagined that what he was looking for would be with that mammoth. Next, he strikes the mammoth on the head. Bai considers that after being sealed for so long, the mammoth would be more vulnerable than usual, which explained the ease of the strike. Even so, a monster of such magnitude would not succumb to a single attack. Thus, the protagonist continues his attacks until he completely defeats the enemy. In the heat of battle, he invokes an ability. This power is known as Sanctuary. With it, his strikes are amplified. In this way, not only the mammoth, but also the other enemies are defeated by the protagonist. He then receives all the bonuses for the victory. However, what truly matters is not the reward, but rather the item the mammoth dropped. It is the king's reply stone, a pair of jade stones with a special function. In addition to the item, the protagonist mage class ascends to rank D. However, he now faces another challenge. His teammate still remains in a state of shock. The protagonist approaches her and asks if she remembers their agreement. Although visibly disoriented, Qian harbors no ill intentions. After all, she also leveled up just by being part of Bai's team. Meanwhile, outside the dungeon, the teachers are in a panic. The camera monitoring the most important student stopped working, and they fear that the dungeon seal has broken. One of the teachers finds the veteran student who was supposed to be accompanying the novices and questions why he is there alone. However, the teacher concludes that there is no time for inquiries. If the seal has truly broken, everyone needs to head to the dungeon urgently. Witnessing the situation, Zealing thinks it would be beneficial if the seal did break, as that would mean the end of the arrogant student. In a state of desperation, the teachers and students enter the dungeon. However, they encounter the two students, Bai Yi and Qian, safe and sound. In turn, the protagonist asks the teachers why they came to the dungeon. The teacher explains that due to the energy fluctuation, they believe the seal had broken. Now, however, they realize that it was all just a misunderstanding. A little before leaving school, Zealing sought out the student guild's vice captain, looking for a spot on the team. However, the vice captain informed him that someone else had already been selected to fill the position. Zealing, the veteran student, obviously fell into despair. After all, he believed that this spot belonged to him and did not understand the reason for his rejection. At that moment, the guild captain speaks up, claiming that a more talented person had been found. Her name is Hill, and she states that Bai is more interesting than any other student. On the same day, in another location, inspection team investigator Chenjin Wu, the same person who assisted in the protagonist's father's arrest, talks with the protagonist's father outside the prison, claiming it was difficult to get him out and asking him not to get into any more trouble. Chenjin Wu informs him that Captain Hong will arrive soon and states that Mr. B already knows what to do. Upon receiving a call from his boss, Chenjin Wu announces that he is leaving and adds that Mr. B knows how to get home by himself. In turn, the protagonist's father expresses his anxiety about this. Upon returning home, the protagonist's father had a surprise. His wife and son were not there. Irritated, he began to smash objects, wondering how they dared to flee. His rage grew to such an extent that he wished to eliminate his own family upon finding them again. Meanwhile, the protagonist presented his mother with one half of the resonance jade. He instructed her to keep the object with her at all times. From that moment on, the other half remained with Bai. Bai explained that if she were in danger, she would only need to break her half of the jade. The other part would be instantly signaled. The protagonist stated that only then would he feel at ease leaving her alone when he left home. Bai thought his mother had never received a gift like that. In fact, she had never even had the basic things every woman should have. His mother commented that Bai shouldn't spend all his time attached to her, as at his age, it was common to go out and have fun with friends. The protagonist replied that it was fine. After all, he didn't need friends. His mother, however, disagreed, arguing that he needed to make friends, as it was essential to have important people he could count on. Bai recalled his past. Aware that he had once had friends, he wondered if in this life he would find friends again. Sometime later, Bai headed to another demonic lair. Having resolved his other pending matters, he wished to focus on strengthening himself and found a rarely used lair due to its extreme difficulty. With the goal of improving himself, Bai entered the dungeon. He reflected that in his past life, he had become a Heil warrior. However, that didn't prevent his companions from being eliminated. Now he wanted to act differently, knowing that strength alone wouldn't be enough. In any case, evolving was important. But this time, the protagonist adopted a more individualistic mindset. For him, there was no point in having friends. It was better to focus on himself than on a team, because on the day the gods decided to toy with him again, dying alone would be preferable to seeing his friends eliminated before his eyes. Above all, he wished to become stronger than anyone else and intended to do so as quickly as possible, even if it meant fighting with all his might. Bai still considered himself weak, as he believed he couldn't defeat his father, even fighting with all his strength, not to mention the one who killed him in his past life. Furthermore, there were no shortcuts, and the option to give up the fight didn't exist. His only alternative, therefore, was to evolve to the fullest until he reached a level superior to that of his enemies. Facing the monsters, the protagonist invokes the Sanctuary skill. With it, he eliminates several of them. However, time is running out as the dungeon gate is about to close. He knows he needs to defeat the boss quickly.